Hello and welcome to this AGU Career Center webinar featuring Rebecca Haacker and Valerie Sloan. I'm Eric Hankin, Student Programs Manager at AGU, and I'll be your host for today's webinar titled, Making the Most Out of Summer Opportunities in the Earth and Space Sciences. If you have questions during the presentation today, please type them into the question box on the right side control panel, and we'll answer as many as we can at the conclusion of the presentation. There are two handouts for today's webinar. You can access these handouts by clicking on the Handouts tab on your GoToWebinar control panel, and then clicking on the document to download it. You can download these handouts at any time during the webinar. And finally, the link to the online recording of this webinar will be sent to all webinar attendees in a follow-up email in a few days. Presenting today's webinar are Rebecca Haacker and Valerie Sloan, two director-level professionals specializing in outreach and education at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, or NCAR. Today they'll be discussing the many things to consider and plan for in advance of your summer employment opportunity, and how to leverage that experience to help advance your studies and your career. And with that, I'll pass the mic over to Rebecca and Valerie. Take it away. Hello and welcome to this AGU Career Center webinar featuring Rebecca Haacker and Valerie Sloan. I'm Eric Hankin, Student Programs Manager at AGU, and I'll be the host for today's webinar titled, Making the Most Out of Summer Opportunities in the Earth and Space Sciences. Presenting today's webinar are Rebecca Haacker and Valerie Sloan, two director-level professionals specializing in outreach and education at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, or NCAR. Today they'll be discussing the many things to consider and plan for in advance of your summer employment opportunity, and how to leverage that experience to help advance your studies and your career. And with that, I'll pass the mic over to Rebecca and Valerie. Take it away.
Yeah, hello everybody. It's my pleasure to be on this webinar with all of you today. So both Valerie and I work here at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in beautiful Boulder, Colorado. We are a federally funded research and development center. So we manage a lot of large facilities like you see on the slide. We have pretty cool planes flying into storms and doing, for example, air pollution research. We also run large supercomputing facilities for all of you at the universities so you can run your weather and climate models. And every year we host a suite of internship programs, everything from high school to undergrad, graduate, and postdoc programs here. And so both Valerie and I, for many years now, have helped our interns to be successful here at NCAR when they come. So we share a lot of the resources that we will present today with the interns that come here. But we also do this kind of work nationally, and we try to help other internships to share these tips. So I'm glad you're getting all these tips from Valerie today in person. As you can see here on the next slide, your career as you go through your undergrad and potentially graduate program has many different puzzle pieces. And what you're thinking about for this summer, either in a job, in a field work, or in an internship, is only one of these many components. You see here you have your undergrad and potentially grad programs, your scholarships and fellowships. All of it kind of fits nicely together. And what we're talking about here today are hopefully tips that help you in many of these elements. So not just in your summer internship. I think a lot of what we share will also help you to be successful in your undergrad programs or graduate programs.
Sorry, that's not you. Okay, so now it's a time to do a poll, and I think Eric or Nathaniel will take over. Is that right?
Absolutely. Okay, so what we want to know from you, which of these answers best describes your upcoming summer opportunity? Field or lab technician, science research or engineering internship, some other sort of internship, geology field camp, or something else, or you haven't quite figured it out. You can only choose one answer, so we're sorry if your upcoming experience qualifies for several of these. We'll give you a few more seconds to answer. And we'll close the polls in 3, 2, 1.
Great.
Okay, and it looks like, wow, 89% are going to be in a science research or engineering internship. A few will be out in the field or as a lab tech, and a few haven't figured it out yet. But science or engineering internship is easily the most.
Great. Well, that's exciting. And you'll be happy to hear that a large survey of many, many employers by the Chronicle of Higher Education, which is a publication, asked how much weight do you give each of the following educational credentials when you evaluate a recent college graduate's resume. And number 1 came out as internships, and number 2 came out as employment during college. So what you're doing this summer is really, really helpful for you going forward in your career. And this is because of the nature of the work that you're doing and the skills that you'll be learning about how to do a project, how to work with a team, organize and analyze data, communicate, and work respectfully with others, amongst other things. Sorry, can you tell me which slide you're on here that you see? Is it the bar graph?
Yep, internships and employment during college rows, ...
So it's always the large one. So this is the graph showing those results. So we'd like to go ahead and dive into some tips to help you kind of think about, wrap your head around the summer. One of them is to really find out about the organization that you will be working with. Maybe that's a department at a university, or maybe it's some company or a field camp kind of thing. So use your detective skills and read about the organization on the web. Look up news stories about it. Ask about the project you're working on. Write to the email or call the people involved or in charge to find out more. And ask for some suggested reading materials to give you this background. Are you moving to a new place? Well, look into the town where you're going, or the location, and find out about its climate. For example, is it super hot? Is it rainy? How is it different from where you live? And what will you need to bring in terms of clothing? Find out what's available where you're going to be living and what you need to bring. Do you need to bring towels and other kinds of things like that? And then bring some personal items, maybe some photos that you can put up to make you feel more at home. Finally, prepare a list and include documentation. Make sure to find out what you need to bring so that when you register with your employer, that they have the right paperwork from you and documentation. Okay, this one is really, really important. And there's a saying that sums up the whole thing, which I love, which is how you do anything is how you do everything. So everything you do really matters. Here are some tips. We suggest that you keep in touch, close contact with your mentors. Try to talk to them very regularly. Just check in and find out if you're on the right track for a project, for example. Let them know about hurdles and that kind of thing. Make sure you know what the expectations are in terms of the hours, and stick to them. People notice if you're there when you're supposed to be. Also, it's really important to be organized and also offer to help. Do more than you have to do. Like, don't do just the minimum. These are things that really develop you as a professional and your reputation as a professional. Okay, this one, maybe you've seen this, but it's a comic. It's really an important one to make sure that you write emails and you communicate in a professional manner. This is an example of it's a comic showing a TA, a teaching assistant at a university, editing how an email is written by a student. And I think that this is a way that we need to do this in our working world. So starting with a salutation like, "Dear Professor Martinez," if they reply with their first name, then you might assume that you can reply to them with their first name. It's really important with whatever social media you use to be really careful and clean and lock down your privacy settings. Make it sort of boring, avoid partying pictures and that kind of thing, especially if it's open for people to see. because your colleagues may end up checking or seeing things that you want to make sure you're happy with whatever they're seeing.
Yeah, and this is Rebecca again, and I wanted to share a couple of thoughts around how you should dress at work. And of course, for all of us in the geosciences or in engineering, that's a little bit tricky, especially if you're also required to do some field work. So during most of my studies, I was dressed like most folks in Gore-Tex and being out in the field, and it was kind of cool to be that way. At the same time, and that's fine, and you need to be safe in the field and dress that way. At the same time, there will be many, many hours that you're actually in an office or in a cubicle somewhere, either at a university or at a lab. And so try to find out what is expected in your workplace, how you should dress. And be careful if someone says, oh, it doesn't really matter, come in however you feel like. And even orienting yourself by the staff around you might not help you. My general tip is try to dress a little bit better than the people around you, because you still have to prove yourself. The scientist next to you in shorts and a t-shirt might already have numerous awards and PhDs, and you're still trying to kind of establish yourself in the field. So my tip is come in shorts and t-shirt if it's hot, but bring something you can throw on top, like a jacket or a long sleeve shirt if you have to. Suddenly you're called into a meeting, for example. So just be creative around that. You see this graphic here, kind of wondering what is business casual versus professional. And some of it certainly applies only to the times where you have to give, for example, a talk in front of your lab group, or maybe a poster presentation by the end of the summer. But I believe we have a quick poll for all of you right now, correct?
Yes, we do. So on to our second poll question of the day. Which of these are considered quote-unquote business casual? Polo shirt or a blouse, shorts or flip-flops, chinos or mid-length skirt, or blazer with a tie? And we'll close the polls in 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed. All right, and 74% of people say that business casual, a polo shirt or a blouse, 17% chinos or a mid-length skirt, and 9% blazer with tie.
Yeah, and these are, it's not a clear-cut thing, what is business casual, how we define it, but I would agree with all of the respondents that those fall into the category of business casual. Okay.
Okay, and now I wanted to talk a little bit about networking. You will get that tip a lot, that you need to make sure that you network during your summer opportunity. And I wanted to put one caveat out there. Me personally, I'm not afraid anymore of networking, but I shy away from it. I am not very good at chit-chat. I often have a hard time figuring out what to say first when I meet people. But here are a couple of tips that we'd like to share of maybe how you can handle this very awkward thing of networking. First of all, if you're in a lab or a university where a lot of stuff happens in the summer, try to take advantage of it. So go to talks, events, or gatherings. And even sometimes when there are events, arrive a little bit early and maybe look for the staff, offer to help a little bit. You might meet people who afterwards can then give you tips and help you. And the next bullet, I think, is so important. Aim to be interested, but not necessarily interesting. It is very stressful if you think that you have to talk about yourself an awful lot in a networking event. People actually, and there's research on this, people like you better if you ask them questions. What do you do? And just listen, and you will learn a lot about what other scientists and engineers are working on. And plus, they will remember you positively that you asked them about their work. People love talking about themselves. So that is a way around. If you're a little bit shy, ask 1 or 2 questions, volunteer a little bit what you do, but you don't have to be so stressed that you have to entertain everyone. And if you're really shy like me, what I tell myself is I don't have to talk to everybody in the crowd. Maybe tonight I'm just going to aim to talk to one person and have a really meaningful conversation. And then I promise myself I will follow up with that person and thank them for the conversation or send them an invitation to my end of summer poster presentation. So make networking work for you. It doesn't have to be that you are the most chit-chatty person out there at an event. Make it work for you.
So depending on your opportunity, many summer research internships, for example, will ask of their students to prepare a poster and a talk, or maybe it will be a talk and a paper. It will depend, or it might be several different things. And sometimes they'll have communications workshops to help support you in doing this. This is a really challenging part of summer research internships and work in general. So the advice that we would suggest is that you use the people around you to help you by getting feedback from them, and to do that starting quite early and doing it quite frequently. It's the kind of thing that you really don't want to leave this to the last end part of the summer and then feel really stressed out. So the sooner that you start on it, maybe it's even creating a draft poster even in the second or third week of your program, just a draft, and putting in pictures that you get off the web and maybe a tentative title for your poster. It really eases your stress if you can do that. Or the same for organizing a talk, putting together a talk, a draft talk with 7 slides, for example, can be really helpful in easing the pressure on you, because you know you've got something to work with, and then you can use that to get feedback. Set up practice times with your advisors and with peers to give your talk, for example. And then we really would encourage you to consider presenting at a conference in the fall, because this is a really wonderful professional experience where you can learn about how to present and about the topic, the broader topic of your field, and network with other people. So identify conferences in your field with your advisor, and we'll show a list of some at the very last slide. So for example, at the AGU meeting in the fall in December, there are sessions, technical sessions where you can present, and there is actually a session for undergraduates. Now take note that the abstract deadlines are mostly in the summer, and so part of what you would need to do is to actually write an abstract about your work. You don't have to have earth-shattering results to present. You can even present about the method you used. You know, if things don't go as you hope in terms of your research, don't despair. You've probably learned something about how you're doing your project. If you find that you can't travel, you don't have the money, the funds, or you can't get the funds, or you, and there are some scholarships, do check out the AGU Virtual Poster Showcase. If you just Google search that, you'll find more out about it, but it's a remote opportunity where you upload your abstract and then your poster, and you can participate even as a judge. It's really great. And one of the good things about presenting at a conference is that you can then put in your resume that you have technically a publication, even though it's not a journal article, and you put down the citation of your paper, which is really impressive going forward when you're applying, if you're applying to graduate school or to many jobs. As you go through the summer, think about which skills you want to develop that you can then include on your resume. There are many, many, many things that you'll be doing this summer that you can actually build into different sections of your resume. Those might be computer skills, technical skills like instrumentation, communication skills. And here's an example of a couple of bullet points that you can add. You want to start with a verb on your bullet points and summarize what you did that pertains from the summer. So it's really a rich opportunity. You might even keep a list during the summer and add things, workshops you've been to, communication workshops, for example, or perhaps scientific seminars and training. And if you do end up giving a talk, even if it's just at your department or in your program, do include it under a section called presentations as a citation. Okay, finally, as far as tips go, to stay out of trouble, well, it helps if you know what's expected of you. And so if you're unclear about that at the very beginning of the summer, even on the first day, be sure to ask questions to find out what does the staff expect from you. And that might be about your hours or what are the deadlines for the work that you have to produce, for example. Another really important area is to be ethical around the research. This is a growing area of importance. And the idea is that we're honest with our data and about our data. So maybe we have a plot where from our field data or lab data, for example, and you do a correlation, but you have these data points that just don't fit at all. They sit way out. They're outliers, just for example. Well, you know, do you ignore them? And no. Actually, sometimes these little outliers are the point of future discovery because they lead to real new information. So it's something to talk about with. It's also sort of a chance to discuss a problem with your mentors. This is really important, and occasionally in the news there will be a story about some researcher who has fabricated entire sets of data and their career is ruined. We're not talking about that, but it is important to be really ethical about your data.
Yeah, and this is Rebecca taking over, and I wanted, so many of the tips that Valerie just shared with you, hopefully your mentor or your mentoring team, your supervisor in a summer job will help you, and ideally you can ask about those kind of things and get good feedback from your mentors. And I find it incredibly encouraging when I see what our summer students say at the end of the summer, saying ideally when they found a role model or a champion and a mentor, somebody who believed in them and supported them, that is the ideal situation. And I really wish that all of you will find that type of mentoring during the summer.
And we have a poll now, Eric or Nathaniel.
Yeah, actually, we'd love to hear more from our audience. So we're going to do something called a hands raised exercise. So you'll see in your control panel on the right, there's the option to raise your hand. We're interested in how many folks in our audience currently have someone they consider to be a mentor. That can be a mentor either in for academia, for your job, or just in life in general. If you have someone you consider to be your mentor, click the hands raised button. Give it a few more seconds for folks to chime in. Okay, and it looks like about 40% of our audience, so 10 people, have someone they consider to be a mentor.
Wonderful. And yep, there we are. I wanted to talk a little bit more about mentoring because I think it is so important. And what I wanted to share with you is the myth of the single mentor. So when we often ask, do you have a mentor? We think of this one supportive, all-knowing senior person that shares their knowledge and supports us and guides us over a long period of time and kind of can help us with all of the things that we just mentioned. But there's a real downfall to that kind of single mentor model, as we call it, because we assume that this one person has all the time and the energy in the world to help you. And it also kind of assumes that this one single mentor has all the knowledge that you need. For example, about research ethics or how to deal with your data, what conference to go to, and what graduate program to attend. And so I wanted to share with you a different way of thinking of mentoring or finding mentors this summer that hopefully you can use as you go into your opportunity. And I think this is available as a handout, so you don't have to take notes on this, but I just wanted to show it to you. that here you are in the middle of this handout. And there are a lot of different things that we seek mentorship on. For example, who is giving us the right feedback if we start on the top of this and go kind of clockwise? Who helps us in terms of professional development? What type of skills should I still train in? Is it computing skills or communication skills? Who helps us emotionally when we feel really down about our career, or maybe something happened at home? But also, who is our intellectual community? Do we have people we can bounce ideas off? A safe space. If you really don't feel comfortable, say in your workspace or in school, who do you go and talk to, etc.? So you here, for example, have role models, people who hold you accountable, people who give you access to opportunities. For example, scholarship, travel scholarships, who tells you about these things. And sponsorship is a really important piece. So while mentorship is all of these things, sponsorship is somebody who mentions your name to other people and says, oh, you should really consider Mary for this, and maybe I can put forward a little bit of money for her to go to this conference. It's somebody who speaks up for you. And as you see, you don't need one person who is all these things for you. As you go through your career, try to pencil in already. Who do you have in your life currently? Who can fill in some of these bubbles for you? And then you can be very proactive and kind of seek out more connections and, as you said earlier, the networking to kind of see what other areas you need to fill out.
And we'd like for you just to take a minute here to look at this and to think about, where do you have people that fill these roles, and where do you need more people to fill these roles? And we have a poll question for you to answer.
Yeah, on to our third and final poll question of the day. So we're interested in which of these areas you feel like you have a gap in your support, whether it's your emotional support, role models in and out of science, the intellectual community or your colleagues, sponsorship and access to opportunities, or someone who holds you accountable and gives you honest feedback. All right, and we'll close the polls in 3, 2, 1. Okay, it looks like the largest gaps, Val and Rebecca, are sponsorship and access to opportunities with 38%, and then followed by intellectual community and peers at 24%.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised at all that the sponsorship piece is a little bit lower. I think in general that happens, and I think ideally it increases, that area gets better as you go to grad school or get a job. But I do believe that that is probably the hardest thing for undergraduates. So it makes sense to me seeing the percentages that way.
Yeah, and you can feel free to ask your advisors and mentors to support you in that regard and to help you identify opportunities and perhaps to introduce you to people. So altogether, if you go in with your eyes open and you really attempt to get a lot out of your experience, you should be able to have really a rich, fun, and also challenging experience. So just to keep in mind that it is a lot of work, and everybody faces challenges and hurdles somewhere along the way in these experiences, and to keep your eyes on the long-term picture and the end goal. And be sure to communicate with the staff openly about how it's going, because if they don't know what's going on, they can't help you. So here's some useful resources for you before we go on to questions. That first link, which we'll leave this up for a little while here during the questions, or during the whole time actually, is a web page that if you aren't familiar with what a research experience for undergraduates is, you can find out more. And if you want to learn more about one that maybe you're going into, that can be helpful as well. There's a handout with a nice publication by the Council for Undergraduate Research called 5 Essential Skills for Every Undergraduate Research, and it covers creativity, judgment, communication, organization, and persistence. To find out more about the AGU virtual poster showcase, there's a link there, and we would love for you to participate in that. It's easy to do. Even if you go to another conference, you can consider participating in this. And then lastly, here's a list of acronyms of scientific society meetings. So all of these have annual meetings where you can present your work in cities around the country. And again, these generally have summertime deadlines for submitting abstracts. So check those out, and you can even tell your internship advisors about some of these if they haven't heard of them. So with that, we'd love to move into questions and hear what kinds of questions you have for us.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca and Valerie, for an awesome presentation. While we wait for folks to type in their questions into the question box, we have a couple of our own. So I can remember back to when I was a summer intern in my undergraduate days, and I was working for a company that didn't have a lot of interns in the department I was a part of. So I didn't have a natural group of folks to hang out with, to talk with. Do you have any advice on how students who are going into a summer internship in a similar situation can network and meet people in the office who may be 10, 15, 20 years older than them?
This is Rebecca. Yeah, one thing comes to mind, and maybe I pose that question back to you. Were there any type of group meetings in the company that you worked at, something that you could have participated in?
Yeah, there were the occasional meetings, whether they be weekly or monthly. Obviously, over a summer internship, a monthly meeting isn't meeting often enough for you to really build up a network, but weekly, certainly.
Yeah, and I've been in that situation as well, where I was the only intern in a foundation, and what I ended up doing is asking very specifically the one or two people that were supervising me if they could introduce me to other people. And I also volunteered to help with other people's projects, or say, I still have an hour today, is there something I can do for you? And so I basically got to know other colleagues, and I heard what they were working on, and somebody then even took me out in the field because I had volunteered to put some folders together. So it took a little bit of effort and it was extra work, but I ultimately learned about more projects that way.
Yeah, and this is Valerie. Another idea would be to ask if there are students in other programs around campus or the organization, and could they help you meet them or connect with them. If you happen to be living in a dorm, for instance, that's an opportunity right there to meet other students. So I think that's a great idea that Rebecca suggested, of asking for people to introduce you or tell you about other places where maybe you can meet other students. And there may be on campus some organizations, student organizations. Got to be a little bit bold and go and explore these things and try to meet people who you don't know, and then you find out who you click with. But it's definitely challenging if you're on your own.
Great, thanks. That's awesome advice. So we have a question from Chris. Chris asks, what kind of questions should we have ready when meeting with mentors? When is it best to ask questions of the team you are working with versus a mentor?
Oh,
that's a great question.
Wow, that's great. I think going into the first meeting, what Val was mentioning earlier, really understanding what the expectations are. What we have found is that many of our mentors here at NCAR are so friendly and so kind that they're even shy of expressing expectations themselves. So it's actually really helpful if the intern asks those things. So what are the hours? When should I come in? How often would you like to see me? Should I first communicate by email and then follow up? Do you expect me to set up a meeting every time I want to talk to you? Is it okay if I pop into your office unannounced? Just kind of really clarifying those things. And then also asking those kind of other things. Are there seminars? Are there things I can go to? So you understand the larger group a little bit better. Could you please introduce me to the people around you who should I talk to when you're not here? I think that will happen a lot. People will have travel commitments. They might not be there all summer, and then often interns are disappointed and say, ooh, my mentor was never there. But maybe there's, as you just pointed out, there's a team that you could talk to. And then the team, especially if they're grad students or maybe more junior staffers, they might be great to ask, okay, how does this place really work, and who do I need to talk to get some help on my computing things, like the smaller stuff that you might not want to bother your senior mentor with. And then also ask, where do you go here for the best pizza? You know, you kind of want to get a feel for the place, and that would be great if you could ask those questions to your team.
Yeah, I think those are really great questions, and Rebecca's suggested that really help you kind of get a feel for the lay of the land. And you know, a lot of times a mentor maybe hasn't had a new student for a long time, and they forget what is it like to be new, and they're quite comfortable diving into talking about the science or the project, but they forget that, oh, you actually need to know basic things like, you know, even where's the bathroom here? I mean, it's just getting to know where can you get help and what is expected. So hopefully that gives you some idea.
Awesome, thanks. So I'm curious, do you have any advice for how best for folks to work with a grad student as opposed to a senior researcher? As you know, a lot of undergrads, when they're put into a summer research job, are actually going to be sitting in a lab with a grad student most of the summer, not with the professor.
And you're wondering what general advice?
Right. Yeah. Right. What general advice do you have for working with a grad student?
So, yeah, I think that, you know, again, the same sort of things of asking some of these questions and of the grad advisor is important. I think, I mean, hopefully that the student will, you know, have the opportunity to also connect with the professor or the scientist that is overseeing the grad student as well. And I think also perhaps talking with other grad students and other students about how things are working. You know, you can learn more information about how the lab works and who does what. Maybe there's somebody who runs the lab who can also provide guidance. Back to the mentor map or the support network map that Rebecca presented, even in a one summer internship, you can look for different people to be mentors of different kinds. Maybe somebody is really good at MATLAB, for example, and that could be anybody, a student, a lab technician, or a grad student. So perhaps try to build your support group by calling on people who you identify as being good at different things and who seem to be interested and willing in supporting you.
Yeah, and I think in the relationship with the grad student, it might be really interesting to navigate collaborating with the grad student on a research project and also seeing and understanding when that grad student needs some quiet time because they are probably under pressure to get their own research done, their thesis work done. And so having that conversation with them as well, saying how much time can you allocate for me? And are there times where maybe I shouldn't, we can't work on my project because you're busy with something else. Because we have to understand that often the grad students most likely get pulled in last minute into being a mentor. And so being appreciative that they can do this in addition to their own research is certainly important. And be assured that if you stay in the geosciences field, you will meet that person later when they become faculty. So they might be a grad student now, but they could be a future employer very soon.
And you know, that's an interesting point about how the grad student could be pulled in at the last minute. And so one summer I had an opportunity to do field work in the high Arctic of Canada. And rather than take me with him, the professor assigned me to one of his grad students. And I became a third person in his party, and he was not very happy about it. And it was a little awkward, really, to be honest, through the whole summer. And now I look back and I think, I wish I had simply acknowledged that and said, I can imagine that this is a little bit, you know, it was a surprise that you had this, had me put on board here at the last minute, and I just want to acknowledge that and to thank you for supporting me in this. And just by the way, 30 years later, 2 weeks ago, I had lunch with this guy who's in Canada, and it was wonderful. He's a successful scientist. So yeah, I think you do be aware of the constraints or the demands on the grad student.
Awesome. Thank you for answering my question. So we have another one from the audience. It's from Zayana. She asks, if you feel intimidated by your peers, by their knowledge, not physically, should you use it as a goal to reach, or would that be unprofessional? So I guess she's asking, if you feel intimidated by your peers' possibly superior scientific knowledge, should you do your best to try achieve that and maybe be a little competitive with them, or is that unprofessional?
Well, I would back up for a little bit and assure the person who asked that probably everybody in the room feels the same way. We are usually all very aware of our own limitations, and the more you study, the more you realize what you don't know yet, and that only gets worse over time. So I feel every day more and more intimidated, and I wonder when they figure out that I don't belong here. And I think that's very normal and natural, and I've heard this even from lab directors. So as you feel that you're not as prepared as your peers, you actually might be. So give yourself that break. If you then realize, ooh, I am really short on maybe a computing skill or an understanding of thermodynamics or something, yeah, then absolutely, I think, take it as an opportunity to learn more. And you might even then collaborate with those peers and ask them about their work or what they're doing, and hopefully they're nice people and can kind of involve you and teach you a little bit. I see it here often in the internships where people complement each other in their skills and help each other. If you're in a very competitive environment, I've seen that in school settings, then yeah, I can only acknowledge that is really hard. And unfortunately, yeah, you probably have to become a little bit competitive and learn those skills and put yourself forward.
So adding on to that, if someone feels uncomfortable or possibly even threatened or harassed because of the way they're being talked down to either by their peers or by their research advisor, do you have any advice on how they should approach that issue?
Well, if you're at the point where you're really intimidated, you're probably also not ready anymore to speak up for yourself and say, please don't speak to me in that manner. Usually at that point, we're intimidated and we kind of retreat. And I think it's okay to then speak to your mentors. For example, if you're in a group setting like an internship and always the same people speak up and you don't really get to speak up, it is okay to flag that to the staff. As Valerie said earlier, if the staff of a program or a faculty doesn't know that you feel that way, then it becomes kind of difficult to help you. I had a situation where I had somebody in a large field campaign not being comfortable with the group she was assigned to and hadn't shared that with the lead faculty of the field work, but they were comfortable sharing it with me, and so we were able to brainstorm a solution and got them assigned to a different group. So there is often a way out, but you do have to be comfortable to share it with somebody on the staff.
Okay. What if, sorry, I'm reading another question. So what should someone do if they haven't found any work in their field? Do you have any advice on how to find some summer employment opportunities if they haven't found any yet?
Well, I guess I would consider broadening a little bit to related fields where they might be able to get work. Maybe you can find something, an internship in a slightly different discipline, and you will learn many of the same skills of doing research, for example, or about communication, or maybe new skills that you never would have thought, and it'll be super useful. So, you know, finding work that you feel like will be sort of related in some way is great if you can do that. There are still some internships looking for students. If you could look at the NSF webpage, if you Google NSF REU search, you can look up different internships. You could also email me, vsloan@ucar.edu. That's VSLOAN at ucar.edu. Sorry, ucar.edu. And I can share with some internship leaders who may be still looking for students. They are often in different parts of the country, so you probably would be, you know, able to. You would probably need to be able to relocate for 10 weeks somewhere. I think another possibility would be to speak to your various professors if you're in university, and ask if by any chance they might have some work for you. And maybe it's part-time work and you work at Target the other part of the time. But that is still an opportunity to get some research excuse me, experience. And even though it might be part-time, it still counts, and it still is important, it's valuable in terms of both the skills you'll be learning and the knowledge you'll be gaining and so on, plus that on your resume you can say that you were a research assistant. This is true even if you volunteer half a day a week, and you say, you know, professors who don't maybe have a budget for hiring somebody might be able to give you a project and you work on it voluntarily half day a week over the whole summer. You are gaining some research experience, and arrange to meet with that professor regularly so that you're getting feedback, you're showing some effort and progress, and that they in the end will be able to give you a recommendation based on your efforts. So hopefully those are a few ideas. Networking, you know, asking people you know who are professionals. Even another idea is to look up in the place where you're interested in living, for instance, news stories on topics that are of interest to you. For example, let's say you're interested in weather and transportation, and you live in Atlanta. Look up news stories on the web with those keywords of weather, transportation, Atlanta, and read in those newspaper articles about issues and organizations. Could be private sector, could be government, who is doing work on this. And they might have names in there. Look up those people, those organizations, and email them and tell them briefly about yourself and ask if they have any summer opportunities. I think that there is a lot of opportunity available right at your fingertips if you can play detective and reach out to people. They are happy to answer questions, and you can start with a question, for example, like, I was reading about your work on dealing with severe storms in Atlanta and communicating with the public. I wanted to know, how do you decide how to communicate to the public? You can start with a question and then also introduce that you're a student, and then ask about opportunities. So I think there are lots of opportunities there that you can pursue, and good luck with it too.
Great, thanks. So for our audience, we still have time for questions if you have any on your mind. If not, this will be our last question. So ultimately, you know, we'd all like to turn this summer job into a full-time job. Hopefully we really like working with the person or people we're working with and the organization we're a part of. How do you recommend students or recent graduates go about having that conversation with their supervisor in their internship? You know, oh, I really had fun. How can I stay on board?
Well, that sounds like a great way to start to me. You know, I've really been enjoying this opportunity. Maybe wait until you're sort of 2/3 of the way through the summer so that they know your work and they know your work ethic and your professionalism, and that you're a good person to work with. And then, so you're not asking before they have a sense of that. And ask them to, or perhaps you can start with, I really enjoyed this work and I'm looking for opportunities. Do you have ideas both within and beyond this organization? I'm willing to do something that's slightly different, but sort of related, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Rebecca, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the way I've gone about it myself and what I usually recommend people do is exactly not just asking this one specific company, could I stay on board? A company might have a bit more flexibility, and then you might be able to do that. You could also ask in general, do interns stay here after the summer? What are in general the opportunities? So you first kind of find out, is this even a possibility at this institution or at a company? And if they say, no, we never continue our interns, we take new people all the time, then at least you don't feel so bad if they say no to you in particular. If they do say that it's an opportunity, possibility, you might stay on, then ask what they look for and how many hours while you're in school, those kind of things. And then, yeah, start having that conversation. I'm pretty sure if you do well and they enjoy working with you and they have the flexibility financially to keep you on board, they will do that. Speaking for our National Research Lab, that's much harder to do. So we have a lot of funding for people to come in during the summer, and we hire people and we're excited about them. We love seeing them afterwards at the conferences. But we often have no funding mechanism to keep them on after the summer. So it would be a very disappointing conversation if someone just said, can I stay on? And we would have to say no. So try to find out what the environment is that you actually work in, if it's even an opportunity, if it's a possibility that they can keep you on.
You might also ask them about graduate school opportunities and what kinds of research topics do people study. Where are some good graduate programs or advisors in the field that if you're considering graduate school. And you might ask also the people, the staff and the faculty and so on, the mentors, about work outside of academia in the field. A lot of faculty are not as aware of opportunities outside of the university as people who are in the private sector or nonprofit or government, because they haven't really had as much experience. But they might know a couple of people, and again, ask them to introduce you if you're interested in finding out more about what are the work opportunities outside of the university in this field, and who can I talk to?
Awesome. So yeah, so with that, Rebecca and Valerie, we don't have any additional questions. So I want to first thank you guys for taking the time to speak with us and share your knowledge with us today. And thank our audience for joining today's presentation.
Yeah, thanks for joining in, everybody. And thanks, Eric and Nathaniel. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.